Well, joining us now to take a look at security and logistics preparations ahead of the elections is Kabir Adamu, who is a security analyst and chief executive officer of Beacon Consulting Limited. Thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you again on Newsnight. I mean, we'll do so even more often as the elections draw near. Let us talk about the warnings coming from the DSS and other security services that there are threats to the elections, that some people yet unidentified, unnamed, planning to not only cause havoc, but to put on, military fatigues to deceive people. What do you make of this, hearing this from the DSS and other security operatives?
Thank you, Ngozi. Just to give a bit of context to where we are, my consultancy keeps tabs of security developments, incidents when they happen, and for political violence. Since the beginning of this year, we've been keeping tabs of political incidents in the 3 states. As at this morning, we had 133 cases of violence, both political and security-related violence in the 3 states. When we analyzed that 133 incidents, we discovered that Kogi and Imo topped the list, and then Bayelsa came third. This is also in congruence with similar analysis and assessment done by other bodies, including Kimpact Development Initiative, private or civil society organization, as well as INEC. The FMAT assessment that INEC did, it also showed similar outcomes. So point is, we are aware that there is a threat to the election, and that statement by SSS, frankly, did not tell us anything new. What we expected, and I'm saying this with a high sense of responsibility, that organization should have arrested those who are behind that plot and then subject them to the courts for prosecution, because they are the ones that have the mandate for identifying, arresting, and then supporting the prosecution of such elements. When they come out to make such announcements and they don't arrest and they don't put forward those that they say are behind the plot, then it raises a lot of questions. And unfortunately, it does not serve that element of deterrence that every criminal justice system is supposed to serve. So I'm a bit worried, regarding the current environment where the elections will take place after recording 133 incidents from January to now in those 3 states.
Well, Dr. Adamu, I'm quite sure your concerns are well placed, knowing full well that this is not the first time you and so many others have monitored such in elections. Quickly, are there other expectations now? Because we have, if you look at it, less 48 hours to the big moment. What are the key things you expect to see from players, especially the security agents and agencies that will help make these 3 elections a big example for major elections to come?
Well, the third thing is, I wish we had this conversation like a month ago when things should have been done, but the time is so short that it's very difficult really to do anything meaningful. But a lot has been achieved in the last, I would say, 48 hours. We've seen the police deploy massively. As at today, based on the information at our disposal, the police has deployed about 67,000 personnel. And in your report, you did indicate that the civil defense has deployed 4,000 in 1 state. Now, there are over 20 ministries, departments, and agencies in the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, and it's likely that all of them will deploy in one way or the other. So we do not yet know the total number of deployment, but one of the things that we're worried is the over-securitization of the electoral space. On the one hand, it has a positive advantage if the Electoral Act would be followed strictly, in the sense that the neutrality of this, massive deployment can be ensured. But this is Nigeria. You can never ensure fully that this number of persons deployed will be neutral. We've just received a report that the Navy has arrested a particular commander for certain acts related to the election. So that's number one concern. Number two concern is the likely use of some of these deployed personnel for by politicians to achieve political objectives. It's happened in the past, and we haven't seen any confirmation in terms of the actions by the members of ICSES to deny this from happening. One of the things that was agreed in previous elections is that everybody official involved in the election will take an oath before he or she is deployed. We don't know if that has been done. The second thing is that everyone will wear a tag that would help you as a journalist. If I'm doing election observation or monitoring, I will be able to identify that person, and if he has done any act against the law, I will be able to report him. Most times, unfortunately, security officials do not wear such tags to allow easy identification. So those are the kind of worries I have at the moment. And like I said, it's a little bit too late, but we are optimistic. As you're aware, town hall meetings have been held. Just today, the National Peace Committee signed an accord. And then, of course, several other bodies have attempted to intervene to ensure that we have elections. At the end of the day, it is the responsibility of citizens of these three countries to ensure that their mandates are protected, and they go out, they cast their vote, and anyone who wants to truncate that process, they try to prevent that person. It's not really, in terms of being optimistic, I'm not too optimistic given what I have monitored over the last few weeks.
Really sad. I mean, you touched on it a bit, but let's stay a bit on that. How to ensure neutrality and professionalism on the part of these security operatives when they are deployed. And secondly, I'd like you to address, the accessibility of military uniforms or military, gear to this unknown non-state actors. How easy really is it for these people to access military or even police uniforms?
Unfortunately, extremely easy, in the sense that most of the materials that are used for making these uniforms are accessible in the open markets. In the case of some of the agencies, it's not a hidden fact that their personnel actually make these uniforms themselves. They go to the open market, buy it, and then they are able to make it. Then for some of the more organized non-state armed groups, it's on record that they do have, a system, as it were, of obtaining some of these issued materials, including the uniforms. We've seen several videos portraying operatives of these non-state armed groups wearing either military or sometimes other security personnel uniforms. So the system in place at the moment to monitor and to prevent access or usage of these uniforms, unfortunately, is not effective as it should be. With regards to the first part of your question, the neutrality of our security agencies, there's a lot that needs to be done to ensure that. I talked about the oath that the Electoral Commission indicated that it would require, and I think it's part of the Electoral Act, any official involved in the elections to take. We're aware of that. However, we do not have any system of knowing whether that is actually being implemented and complied with. And the difficulty is this. First off, most of the security agencies do not subject themselves openly and freely to the control and supervision of the electoral umpire, and for the simple reason that they believe they're security officials, and so they cannot subject themselves to the electoral umpire for that. The second reason, unfortunately, is also the massive number of security personnel involved in the process. Some of them are brought together from different locations to converge in that location. So the process becomes a little bit cumbersome and difficult to run from, let's say, Abuja as an example. But I think we've matured enough, we've reached a stage in our electoral practices that system can be institutionalized, and then a very strong M&E mechanism that is embedded within the electoral body, INEC, to ensure that anyone participating in the process is first identified, either through biometrics or some other technological process, and then of course that person's identity is known, so that when that person commits an act, he or she is able to be penalized, as it were. But suffice to say, there is a lot that remains for us to do in order to ensure the neutrality of these officials. Even if we're able to get their commanders to be neutral, how about the operatives that are in the field?
Absolutely.
So really, a lot that needs to be done.
Well, Kabir, speaking of which, the M&E evaluation especially, it will seem as if this is deja vu. We've gone through this route before, and after another election or close to another election, we'll come back and say the same thing. We'll get to, it doesn't go beyond warning troublemakers, and ultimately we'll get to see troublemakers, and at the end of the day, it looks as if nothing happens to the troublemaker. What do we expect to see? We're talking about 3 states that will make the difference in these elections.
Suleiman, this is the first election that our beloved president is going to conduct. It is also the first election after the controversies that followed the February and March election that, thank God, we've put behind us after the Supreme Court ruling. And so it is a litmus test for the president. And I would want to personally appeal to him to take this seriously and ensure that the performance delivery system that he signed last week with his ministers is extended to INEC in such a manner that the conduct of INEC and the conduct of its officials and the conduct of anyone involved in the electoral process is monitored and measured through key performance indicators. We know what we expect is not difficult. We expect a free, fair election. And anything short of that would be a disappointment and an embarrassment to us. And I don't think we're asking for too much. And so the best thing to do is to implement such a process where we can monitor this. And then more importantly, there will be accountability. If we have such a process that monitors performance and anyone falls short of that, then of course that person is penalized. Anything short of that, unfortunately, would be the deja vu that we all don't want. And I think, again, I say this is a litmus test. It's an opportunity for both the president and INEC to show that they are committed. He's stated it is committed to a free and fair election. But beyond that, I think we need to have a performance monitoring or measurement system that allows for accountability, and then of course that also enables him to take measures against anyone who does not meet the expectations of his or her office.
Let you go, Kabir Adamu. Let's look at the redeployment of the Imo Commissioner of Police. Would you say that would go, to a large extent in ensuring this neutrality or professionalism that is expected? I mean, should that be a template going forward, for pre-election, moves?
In my understanding of the history of elections in Nigeria, I think it's a traditional practice. Every time before an election, the Inspector General of Police would usually deploy, usually the commissioners of police in that location, and then sometimes the AIGs in charge of the regions. And then, of course, deploy additional top management and policing staff to the location to support the process in those states. So that is what this current IG did. Now, why I think the case of the Imo Commissioner of Police has become, quote unquote, an issue of national discourse, I think is because of the controversial role, quote unquote, that he has played. That requires, I think, more investigation. The issue that had to do with the NLC president, which is not the remit of this conversation, that I think sadly has also brought to fore some issues with regards to the electoral space and the equal space with which the election is being held. For the first time, I think, in our history, we have an openly partisan president of the Nigeria Labour Congress. It's not a hidden fact. He's admitted to it. And if actions that appear to be political are meted out against him, is it on his person or him as the president of the NLC? So I think that is something that the NLC as a body needs to really think very strongly about. When they are partisan and they take such a position, what would be at what point do you separate the identity of their president and then their position as a partisan body. Again, back to the Commissioner of Police, his withdrawal, I think, has also served the calls by a lot of civil society organizations that have made that call. But will it be enough to ensure the neutrality of security agencies within the system? Sadly, no. Like I mentioned earlier on, we need to do more. There are constitutional provisions that indicate clearly the role of each ministry, department, agency, commission in all of these functions. Earlier on, I talked about the role of the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security. That role is very clear. The two chairmen of that committee are the chairman of INEC and then the National Security Advisor. I had expected before the elections a plan, as it were, for the elections in the 3 states, a plan that would state clearly the role of each of the members of that body, including the police. We're aware that the police is the lead agency in internal security, but the reason why that committee was set up is because of the realization that the police cannot do it alone. So a plan stating clearly an identification of the threat, an evaluation of that threat, the risk element within the election eco space, and then the mitigation measures for that, those risk elements is what I had expected. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. Remember earlier on, I said it's too late for some of these things, but I'm saying this for future elections. Very soon we'll have another off-cycle election. So I'm hoping that some of these things would be done so that we don't find ourselves where we are at the moment. We've identified the risk factors. I don't want anyone to leave this conversation with that doubt. The risk factors are known. What is missing at the moment is adequate controls or treatments for those risk elements. And those that have the responsibility for those treatments are members of this Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security that are supporting INEC.
Well, it's a fine place for us to leave it. Many thanks for your time as always, Dr. Kabir Adamu, security consultant and CEO of Beacon Consultancy Limited.